I didn't hear the crack, just the thud of my shoulder hitting tile and the strange hollow echo of my voice saying, "Oh." The pain in my hip was immediate, hot, deep, and certain. I tried to sit up, but my legs wouldn't follow. My left foot wouldn't even twitch. The bathroom light hummed overhead. Outside the frosted window, the sky was still dark. I reached for the edge of the sink, but it was too far. My elbow slipped. My cheek touched the floor. Cold wet. Somewhere behind me, the toilet kept running. I fumbled for my phone still on the counter. No use. I had to get to the hallway. I turned myself sideways, then dragged 1 inch, 2. The edge of the bath mat caught under my forearm. My breathing sounded louder than it should. Once in the hall, I pulled myself to the small table by the stairs. There was an old landline there. I hadn't used it in months, but it still worked. I called Weston first. No answer. I called Brenna. Straight to voicemail, then Evan. He lived 10 minutes away. He always said, "Anything you need, Mom." It rang and rang. My body trembled from the effort. I tried not to cry. It would only make breathing harder. My teeth chattered from the cold. The floor felt like winter. I laid there staring at the legs of the table, the dust beneath the radiator. A tiny trail of ants moving in slow purpose. Then I dialed June. We'd spoken mostly about trash pickup and property lines. Once she lent me sugar. I didn't expect her to pick up. She did. "Hello, it's Lenora," I whispered. I fell. "I can't get up." "Where are you?" Her voice sharpened. "Are your kids there?" "No, I'm coming." She was at my door 6 minutes later, hair half pinned, jacket over pajamas. I heard her voice before I saw her face. She stepped over my purse, dropped to her knees, and pressed her hand to my shoulder. "You're freezing," she said. "Don't move. I've got you." And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. June rode with me in the ambulance, her hand gripping mine harder than necessary. The paramedic asked for my emergency contact. I gave Weston's number. He wrote it down without comment. No one called him. I didn't ask them to. At the hospital, they rolled me under the X-ray machine and confirmed what I already knew. Fractured hip high on the left. Not bad enough for surgery, but bad enough to change the next few months of my life. Bed rest, physical therapy, slow movement, careful steps. In the small recovery room, the nurse adjusted my blanket and smiled softly. "Is your family on their way?" I shook my head. "No, just me." "Would you like me to call someone for you?" "I already did." She nodded like she understood. I wasn't sure she did. The next morning, my phone buzzed once. A message from Weston. "Heard you had a fall. Let me know when you're back home." No question mark. No call. I stared at the screen for a while, then turned it face down on the table. I didn't bother checking for a reply from Evan. There wasn't one. June came by after lunch with a fresh robe and a small plastic bag of my things. She had also brought a pack of almonds and a paper bag. "In case the food's awful," she said. I wanted to hug her, but the pain made reaching hard. So I squeezed her hand instead. On the 3rd day, a nurse wheeled me out to a van and I was transferred to Briar Creek Rehab Center. Clean walls, lavender soap, a calendar taped to the whiteboard. June unpacked my bag in the corner while I sat on the bed. No one else had come. She placed my glasses by the window, folded my cardigan over the chair. "You want me to text them?" she asked. "No," I said quietly. "They'll reach out when it matters to them." She looked at me for a moment, then nodded. And when Weston finally did appear, he didn't bring flowers. He brought questions about money. They didn't call ahead. I was halfway through a lukewarm tray of soup when I heard Weston's voice at the nurse's station. Moments later, he and Dana walked in like they were visiting a showroom. He looked the same. Pressed shirt, clean shoes, that slight frown he always wore when the world didn't arrange itself fast enough. Dana gave me a quick smile, tight and performative. "Hey, Mom." Weston said no hug, no glance at the walker by the bed. I sat up straighter. "You found the place?" "Yeah, we were nearby. Brenna told us where you ended up." He stood at the foot of the bed, hands in his pockets, eyes darting around the room. Dana took the only chair. There was no, "How are you?" No, that must have been scary. "We're thinking about moving," he started. "Bigger house, something with a better school district. Brenna mentioned you might still have some of Dad's insurance tucked away." I blinked slowly. My hip ached. My heart ached more. "It'd just be a short-term loan," he added. glancing toward the door like he had somewhere better to be. Nothing big, just to help with the down payment. I didn't say a word. Dana cleared her throat. Of course, only if it's doable, and maybe, have you thought about selling the house? It's a lot for one person. At your age, it might be safer in a facility, you know. He said it kindly, like a realtor describing a foreclosure. I turned my head toward the window. A bird was picking at the feeder outside. Its wings fluttered once and then stilled. Anyway, Weston said after a pause. Think about it. They left with the same energy they came. Inefficient, brisk, already halfway through their next errand. I sat with the silence they left behind, hands resting on the thin blanket across my lap. Later that evening, I asked the nurse for my purse, not because I planned to give them anything, but because I needed to prepare for the day they asked again. I didn't sleep that night. The hallway lights dimmed, machines hummed in their slow rhythm, and the scent of antiseptic clung to the air. I lay still, staring at the ceiling, hearing Weston's voice echo in my head. Not the words, but the absence of the ones that mattered. Around midnight, I pressed the call button. The night nurse, a gentle woman named Clara, stepped in. Could you hand me my purse? I asked. The brown one in the drawer. She brought it over and helped prop me higher with pillows. Once she left, I unzipped the bag. Inside, beneath my glasses case and a packet of tissues, was the folder I hadn't opened in months. The paper felt heavier than it should. I laid everything out on the blanket. The copy of my will, the revocation of the power of attorney Weston once bullied me into signing, the trust one had drafted after my husband died. I had always intended to revisit it one day, but I never imagined doing it under a hospital blanket with bruises blooming across my skin. I read each page slowly. My hands trembled from the strain, but my thoughts were steady. The trust still listed all 3 of my children. The will assigned Weston the role of executor. The house was theirs, divided evenly. So were the savings. All written in a time when I believed they'd hold my hand before they held out theirs. The amendment form waited at the bottom. I uncapped the pen with effort, my fingers stiff, and signed my name across the line. It looked smaller than it used to, lighter almost, but final. When I finished, I pressed the papers back into the folder and reached for the phone on the table. My thumb hovered a moment before dialing the number I knew by heart. A groggy voice answered. This is Malcolm. It's Lenora, I said. I'm ready. It's time to make the changes official. He didn't ask for details. He simply said, I'll come first thing in the morning. I set the phone down, folded my hands over the blanket, and let the room settle around me as the decision took its place inside me. June picked me up from rehab on a gray Tuesday morning. She adjusted the passenger seat, loaded my small suitcase in the back, and helped me into the car like she'd done it 100 times. We didn't speak much on the drive. There wasn't much to say. When we pulled into my driveway, the porch light was still burned out and one of the shutters had come loose again. A stack of mail leaned against the door, swollen from rain. Inside, the air was stale and a few of my potted plants had gone limp, stretching toward light that hadn't come. But the house was mine. Still standing, still waiting. I sat in my old chair by the window while June opened a few windows and wiped the counters. I told her I'd be fine. She didn't argue, but she didn't leave right away either. That evening, after she'd gone, I made my way slowly to the bedroom. My cane tapped against the floor like a metronome. Each step a measured beat. In the bottom drawer of my dresser, wrapped in a handkerchief, was a worn manila envelope. The deed. My name and my late husband's typed cleanly across the top. We had signed it together the week after we closed. Him with a confident pen stroke, me with hands that shook just a little. I took it out, sat on the edge of the bed and looked at it for a long while. 2 days later, I walked into Malcolm's office. I used the cane, but I didn't need help getting through the door. He offered coffee. I declined. We signed the new documents quietly. The trust was finalized, irrevocable, airtight, mine. I don't want it passing hands by mistake, I said. It won't, he assured me. By the time I returned home, the envelope had a new document tucked inside. A copy of the updated trust. No one could change it. No one could undo it. I slid it back into the drawer and closed it gently. And just as I was settling back into the living room, there was a knock at the door. Brenna arrived on a bright, restless afternoon, tapping lightly on the door as if she were checking whether I was decent rather than whether I was alive. I opened it with my cane in hand. She smiled big, the way people do when they want to appear warm but have somewhere more important to be. I brought you something, she said, lifting a paper bag. Inside was a container of soup from a deli downtown and a neatly folded silk scarf in pale gold. Thought you could use a little color. I thanked her and set the bag on the counter. We sat in the living room, sunlight falling across the rug in soft strips. She crossed her legs, straightened her blouse, and looked around with the assessing eye of someone taking mental inventory. It's good you're back on your feet, she said. Weston told me you might be making some decisions. She paused, then added lightly, financial ones. I felt the same small hollow ache I'd felt in the hospital, a quiet reminder of what they valued most. I reached for my purse on the side table. The zipper rasped open under my fingers. Inside were 3 envelopes, each neatly sealed, each with a name written in my careful script. I had rewritten them twice before settling on the version that felt true. No anger, no theatrics, only the kind of honesty that waits too long. I held one out. Brenna frowned as she took it. What's this? Something I wrote, I said, while waiting for someone to answer the phone. Her cheeks colored slightly. She opened her mouth as if to speak but shut it again. She slipped the envelope into her bag, smoothing her skirt with quick fingers. Well, she murmured, standing, I'll read it later. I nodded, walking her to the door, watching her hurry to her car as though the air inside my house had turned heavy. When the engine faded down the street, I moved back to the quiet of the living room, settled into my chair and reached for the 2 remaining envelopes. I mailed Weston's and Evan's letters the following morning. Brenna had already received hers in person. I stood at the mailbox a long while after dropping them in, my hand still resting on the metal door. I hadn't written them to punish. Not exactly. Just to say what hadn't been said when it mattered. Weston's letter was the longest. I listed every call I made from the floor that morning, the minutes I spent listening to rings that no one picked up. I reminded him how he used to cry when he scraped his knees, how I sat on the bathroom floor with him once for over an hour while he calmed down. I ended with one line. You were unreachable. So is my inheritance. Brenna's was quieter, fewer words, heavier space. I told her how proud I'd been of the way she used to stand up for her friends in school, how she once gave away her lunch to a girl who had none. I raised you to value people over things, I wrote. I see you chose otherwise. Evan's letter was shortest. I called you from the floor. It began. You were asleep. I was awake in pain. Nothing more. The days that followed were still. No texts, no phone calls, no one knocking at the door. But there was a different kind of noise, one that filled the air like a pressure change before a storm. The silence from my children wasn't emptiness. It was avoidance, a refusal to engage with the version of me they'd never planned to face. The mother who no longer waited. I didn't chase them. I didn't follow up. There was nothing left to explain. They had read the truth. I believe they read it more than once. And still they said nothing. So I made tea in the mornings, let the radio play quietly in the background, watered what plants had survived, and wrote a list of groceries to pick up with June next week. Then I sat down with the final envelope, the one meant for no one but me. June came by that Thursday afternoon with 2 paper bags full of groceries and a small bouquet of daisies she said were on sale. She moved around my kitchen like it was second nature now, putting things away, checking expiration dates, rinsing the lettuce without asking. You know, she said, pulling a jar of preserves from the bottom of the bag, you've had more kindness from me in 2 weeks than from your own blood in 2 years. I let out a soft laugh. Not bitter, not angry, just tired. You're not wrong, I said. She looked at me, then one brow slightly raised like she wanted to ask something but wasn't sure how. I saved her the trouble. I put the house in a trust, I said quietly. Accounts too. Everything's protected now. It's not much, but it's mine. And they can't touch it. June dried her hands on a dish towel and leaned against the counter. So, who gets it when the time comes? I looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes weren't filled with pity, just the kind of steady concern that doesn't ask for anything in return. Someone who answered the phone, I said. She didn't reply right away, just gave a small nod and went back to sorting cans. That evening, after she left, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and the beneficiary form Malcolm had given me weeks ago. It had been blank for too long. I filled it out carefully, June's name, her address, her phone number. I paused for a moment before signing it, long enough to feel the weight of it but not long enough to doubt it. Then I folded it neatly, sealed it in the return envelope and left it by the door to be mailed in the morning. The house felt different that night. Still mine, but no longer waiting for someone who'd never show up. And just as I finished washing my cup, I saw headlights through the curtains. Bright, pausing, then cutting out. Another visitor. They didn't knock. Just let themselves in with the old key I'd never gotten around to replacing. Weston called out from the hallway like he lived here. "Mom." I met them in the living room. Brenna wore that polite, careful smile again, and Weston stood behind her like he'd been forced into this. Evan sat in the car out front, engine still running. He didn't even pretend to come inside. "We've been thinking," Brenna started, smoothing the sleeve of her blouse. "About your safety, about what's best for you long term. It's probably time," Weston added, "to talk about assisted living." I didn't speak, just gestured for them to sit. They didn't. "We know it's a lot to manage alone," Brenna continued. "And while this house it's big. Too big. Wouldn't it be a relief to not worry about it anymore?" I reached for the envelope on the coffee table and handed it to Weston. Another copy waited for Brenna. He opened it, scanned the top page, and his face shifted. His voice lost its polite tone. "You changed everything without telling us." I looked at him evenly. "You made your choice on Tuesday morning. I made mine the next day." His jaw tightened. "You're punishing us." "No," I said calmly. "I'm protecting what's left." Brenna looked down at her shoes, then back at me, blinking too quickly. "This is your legacy," she whispered. "You're throwing it away." "No," I said again. "I'm leaving it with someone who showed up." Neither of them had anything else to say. They left without touching the tea I'd set out. Their chairs still pushed in, the door clicking shut behind them with a finality that felt almost kind. Evan's car pulled away without a glance toward the house. I stood there for a long while, hands resting lightly on the back of the chair. The quiet thicker than usual. The next morning I packed up the last of their things from the upstairs closet. Weeks passed. The air shifted. Not in some dramatic way, just quietly, like furniture settling in a room that finally belonged to itself. There were no more knocks, no envelopes slid under the door, no messages blinking on the phone, no birthdays remembered, no follow-up questions. And still the silence didn't hurt. It just confirmed something I'd already begun to understand. Nothing was coming. June came by twice a week. She brought over a small aloe plant to replace the one that had wilted near the window, helped me fix the crooked shade on my reading lamp, and dropped off stamps without being asked. She never lingered too long, never hovered. "You've got your rhythm now," she said once, watching me navigate the kitchen without the cane. "You're good." I smiled. I was. One afternoon I opened the drawer in the hallway where I kept my purse. The same purse I had reached for in the rehab center. The one that used to carry expectations and grocery lists and old receipts from school field trips long past. Inside was the envelope of original letters, now soft at the edges from being handled, folded, read. I added 3 more that day. No names on the front, no stamps, no anger in the words, just stillness, just the kind of goodbye that doesn't need to be spoken aloud. I placed them beneath the others, closed the purse, and set it gently back in its place. The house held its breath for a moment, then let it out. The sun reached across the wood floors. The kettle on the stove began to hum, and somewhere outside, birds returned to the feeder I had just filled.